Just a little background on this rant. I had a debate recently for a composition class about whether video games cause violence. Of course, being a gamer, I went with no, they don't cause violence. And I figured I'd just run through a rant on the entire subject. Normally, when I do one of my rant videos, I just look at an article and say, hey, I should talk about this. But this time I actually did a lot of in-depth research because I had to do a whole debate on it. So I've got a bunch of note cards and stuff. So I know I look ridiculous, but it's just kind of my thing. Let's get down to business. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. In this age of public shootings and scapegoats, people look desperately for sources of violence. Humans are naive. They believe that humans are naturally good. They believe that something must corrupt a human before they do an act of evil. They must be changed by something, some minuscule act perhaps. People are messaging me on Skype and I'm just going to silence them because I'm invested in this. Many people have shifted to focus on media violence as a possible source of violence, and subsequently they focus on, of course, video game violence, because everyone loves to just put the marginalized, socially awkward nerds in the spotlight. Yeah, try not to do that. There's a reason we're socially awkward. We don't like that. So, of course, they subsequently focus on video games. Now, obviously, don't judge me for the game I'm going to pull out right now. I legitimately bought it because it was a good price. I'm going to sell it. So don't judge me on this. It just happened to be a game that was sitting right here. So I take out my copy of Final Fantasy XI online. This may be a really shitty game. It probably is. It came after 10. It's probably a really shitty game. But I'm not being killed by it. In fact, I don't think this game has killed anyone. On top of that, I don't think The Sims 3 has killed anyone. I don't think Animal Crossing New Leaf has killed anyone. I don't really want to throw any more cases behind me because I love my games. I don't think games kill people. You may think differently. You might have some thing going on where you got some phobia of video games. You think they're going to kill you. But I'd say if you're dealing with that, you're dealing with a whole other set of problems right now. Did you know that vending machines kill more people per year than video games? Okay. People just messaging me on Skype. Vending machines kill, I believe the last time I checked, it was 13 people per year on average. That's even more than sharks. Vending machines are the true concern. We should watch out for them. Now, my thesis statement right here. This is the big boy. This is what I want to say to you. And you may think it sounds redundant. And it may sound redundant. But I just want to drive in certain points of it, and that's why I may repeat parts of it in the same sentence. Ready? Okay. Because studies have shown a lack of applicable evidence, video games should not be to blame for acts of violence, since many years of experiments have failed to provide evidence of any connection on account of experimentation flaws and societal beliefs. There are other backup reasons to support this claim that I'm going to be getting into. I think I need this. Okay, so as I said, I would like to talk about some counter-arguments right now, because, of course, people obviously have counter-arguments when it comes to this subject. People take both sides, and people create arguments for both sides. So, in my debate, I wrote down some of the points that my opponent made. He said, let's see, he said the blood, gore, and sexual violence is exposed to young people who play M games. They are then desensitized to violence. They think violence is normal. Another thing he brought up was when you play violent video games, there's a release of dopamine in your brain. Dopamine feels good. Makes you happy. But when you play violent games and you release dopamine, that apparently makes you want to commit violent acts. Now, I didn't have too much time to really talk about the dopamine thing in the actual debate, but I will make sure to return to it in a few moments after I finish my first point. Now, as for the blood, gore, the sexual violence when people play M-rated games at a young age, well, to be fair, 62% of the console market currently is made up of adults, and 66% of the PC market is made up of adults. So naturally, games would follow a pattern of catering to adult tastes, considering that that's their main audience. It's a very large misconception that games are for kids, because they're not. Some of them are, don't get me wrong. I don't expect to see, like, an old guy playing Winnie the Pooh adventures in Christopher Robin's urethra. I don't expect to see that. Actually, I don't even expect to see that as a game. If that was a game, that probably would not be rated E. That would probably be an adult-only game. Whatever. I don't expect some adult to be playing, on average, young games for children. I'm sure there are some adults that do play young games for children. Why not? Like, screw social norms. But I'm sure most adults probably wouldn't. So really, the market is geared towards adults right now. So the fact that kids are exposed to this stuff, that's not really the market's fault. They're just catering to who's there the most. As for the kids being exposed, I'm going to trace that back to the parents at a later time. As for the whole idea of kids being desensitized to violence, that's a grade A case of bullshit. And I'm going to say this quickly, and I'm going to say this strong, or however you want to say it. I'm going to hit you hard, I'm going to hit you fast. Someone who is reacting to a real-life crisis, generally the same way that they would react to an in-game crisis, is showing severe signs of deep, deep emotional disturbance. So, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that if people who play video games are desensitized to violence, it's not because of the video games. It's because of something that maybe someone early on, a doctor, failed to notice in their mental patterns, or a therapist or something, and that's something that could commonly happen, seeing as we're in America, and America doesn't do a very good job with people who have mental disabilities. So yeah, props to you, America. Just kidding. Ugh. Finally was the point about dopamine. The release of dopamine when you play violent video games apparently causes you to want to kill people. What? I will admit to having dopamine released while playing violent video games, but I'm not sure that makes me want to kill people or to commit any violent acts whatsoever. Dopamine is something in the brain that basically makes you feel happy. It's what they put in antidepressants. It's not what they put in antidepressants, I don't think. It's the antidepressants release dopamine in your brain. But also drugs sometimes release dopamine. But the main healthy sources of dopamine are just happiness. Something goes right, you're happy, dopamine releases. Maybe you're doing something you like, playing a video game. You beat someone in a video game, dopamine releases. That doesn't make you want to go commit violent acts. I don't really know where that point came from, but it still kind of confuses me, because I don't know if that's really what my opponent meant to say or what. but that should take care of that. We have our first evidence card, which actually deals with evidence. So obviously, my opponent quoted multiple studies that showed results that might support a causal link between violence in video games and real-world violence. Unfortunately, I took a close look at a lot of these experiments and found that the ones who were honest about their results actually didn't have a great method of experimentation, and that I'll get into later when I get to the experimentation flaws. But as for the evidence, really no effects in older children have been shown to be long-term. There's no real long-term increase in aggressive, violent behavior. There's no evidence that they go on to commit crimes or anything of the sort. No direct causal link between violence in video games and teen violence. My belief, it's the same belief that I share with probably many writers on the topic, is that social science made up its mind a long time ago that video games cause violence, or that jazz causes violence, or that comic books cause violence, or any of this stuff. But we're focusing on video games. They made up their mind that video games caused violence, and since then have been trying to fit square pieces of evidence into round theoretical holes. And I'm not sure if you played with one of those block toys when you were a kid, when you put the triangle in the triangle, and you put the circle in the circle, the square in the square. I'm not sure if you ever tried to fit the square in the circle. You might not have been a smart kid. I don't know. But it's a bit like trying to shove a piece of coal up your ass and crap out a diamond. It just doesn't work. Yeah. Anyways, on to experimentation flaws. It's a very short note card, but it really speaks to some of my points about how how basically all the evidence can be called into question. Is this evidence valid? Is it invalid? I would like to say no. The evidence is not entirely valid. I feel like I'm going to sneeze here. No, okay. So, I'm pretty sure my opponent didn't look into much of the research he did. He might have just looked at the results, which, for him, that's what he wants. He doesn't really want to look at the method of experimentation, because if he looked at the method of experimentation and he saw something that was off, well, he knew that could cause a problem with the results. However, I saw the results and I said, well, I'm going to look at the method of experimentation and see if these results make sense. So I took one experiment that showed people who played a violent video game, they were thinking more aggressively. Now I'd like to define something. Thinking aggressively does not mean committing violent acts, doesn't mean violence, just means thinking aggressively. So, the two games, they compared Wolfenstein 3D and Myst. Now, I'm not sure if you know what these two games are, one of which, Wolfenstein 3D, was pretty much the first first-person shooter. Created by id. Good game. You shoot Nazis, you kill Hitler. Not much to say about it. It's a simple shooter. And then there was Myst, the puzzle adventure game. So right now, if you're not questioning whether these results are accurate, you might want to go back and listen to what I just said again. Because to me, it seems like if you take a violent video game, a violent adventure video game that's like action-y versus a non-action, non-violent, just kind of relaxing puzzle game, obviously there's going to be questions about these results. I mean, I'm sitting here questioning the results. I'm sure many other people were questioning the results. Wouldn't it be better to take an action game that does have violence and compare the results to an action game that doesn't have violence? I mean, but no, they can't do that because the results would not be what they wanted. Again, with the square pieces of evidence into round theoretical holes. Alright. This next card is labeled Enjoy, because I just didn't have a lot of time to code name these or anything. So, basically, kids express feelings in playtime, in their game playing time, that must be held in check in real life. And this kind of returns to the whole, if someone is responding to a real life crisis the same way they respond to a crisis in a video game, they are showing signs of serious emotional disturbance. And that needs to be looked into. Okay, now we're on to the rating system. Now this talks about the exposure of young kids to violence in video games. Personally, I think that young kids, now I'm not going to give an age, but young kids probably shouldn't be exposed to violence. And I'm going to give a rule of thumb on whether a kid can play an M game. If your kid can watch Saving Private Ryan and understand the meaning and the themes and all that sort of stuff, then he's probably old enough to play M games. Me personally, I feel that the meaning of Saving Private Ryan is that war isn't glorified. I feel like it's a lot about sacrifice, and that's a lot about how war is over-glorified. That's just my take on it. I think I'm pretty spot on, perhaps. I am a genius. Anyways, back to the rating system. Parents have a problem with just they don't abuse or misuse it. They kind of misuse it, but they ignore it. They ignore the rating system because they think games are for kids. Now, like I already said, 62% of the console market is for adults. 66% of the PC market is adults. So, something's in my mouth. So obviously, the video game industry caters to adult tastes because the majority of people buying the games are in fact adults. So, yeah, that's basically all I have to say on that. Now, since I am me and I say young kids should not really be exposed to this stuff, I think parents should be made more aware of the rating system, more aware of all of this stuff, because honestly, I don't think it's a great idea to be exposing kids to this violence. I'm not saying it causes violence, but I am saying that they shouldn't really be exposed to it. I have a little rant to do on this one that I got from one of my favorite TV shows, Scrubs. So, obviously, a variety of art. We all know this is a card about misdiagnosis. Obviously, in the past, a variety of art forms have been blamed for problems in society. We have literature, jazz, rock, TV, music, comics, movies, everything. People think the media is responsible for everyone's personal failings. If we continue on this path, then we will be able to blame. This is when I'm taking a quote out of context to really help my point, but it's just a list. So let's get down to this. If things continue like this, we can blame low-carb diets, Michael Moore, the Republican National Convention, Kabbalah and all Kabbalah-related products, high-definition TV, the Bush daughters, wireless hotspots, the OC, the UN, recycling, getting punked, Denny Gans, Grammys. The Latin Grammys, the real Grammys. Jeff that wiggle who sleeps too darn much. The Yankees payroll, all the red states, all the blue states, every hybrid car, every talk show host, everything on the planet, everything in the solar system, everything that exists, past, present, and future, in all discovered and undiscovered dimensions. And Hugh Jackman. Dr. Cox. He hates Hugh Jackman. He just hates him. So, I feel like this has been enlightening, hopefully, for you on my beliefs. I'm just trying to convert this card into something I can say to you. Because these next two cards were supposed to be me questioning my opponent's entire argument. Well, I had to question my opponent's argument, of course. And I said to him, it seems to me like your entire argument is a slippery slope fallacy. Which, if you're unfamiliar with the term, it means it's a fallacy in which a minuscule event causes the downfall or some giant problem. And my basis for this was, someone plays video games, now they're going to go shoot a school, shoot people, kill everyone, rob things. No, that is a slippery slope. And you know what they say about slippery slopes? You slip, you fall. I wouldn't want my good friend to fall. My opponent's actually a friend of mine. We were just doing it for the grade, although I believe he does believe video games cause violence. Anyways, when you say that someone is... when you say that if someone plays a video game, they're more likely... I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I'm so tired. What he was saying was that someone who plays a video game is just more likely to kill someone. Now, as a gamer, on a personal level, that's like, well, thanks for calling me a threat to public safety. Thanks for calling pretty much everyone in this classroom a threat to public safety. Because I'm pretty sure that more than half the people in the room were gamers when I was in that room. So, yeah. That just went right past the camera. I love it. Anyways, the average gamer does not commit crimes. If someone is killing people and acting violently, it's more likely, I would even guarantee this, that there is probably another cause. And my final closing statement was, my last question, whatever you want to call it. And I know this question's been beat to death, but I felt like it was valid, so I had to bring it up. What violent games were people like Vlad Dracula III playing Adolf Hitler, our buddy, our pal Joey Stalin? What games were they playing?